Welcome to the Treasury Update Podcast, Coffee Break Sessions, presented by Strategic Treasurer, the show where we cover foundational topics and core Treasury issues in about the same amount of time it takes you to drink your cup of coffee. I'll be your host, Jonathan, media production specialist here at Strategic Treasurer, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I am here with Craig Jeffrey, and I got a question for you, Craig.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you call getting data out of systems, sources, or even people's heads?
What do I call it? I think the title of this episode is data extraction, so I would call it data extraction.
Okay. Do you want to elaborate on what data extraction is?
We need data to function, and so extraction is pulling data out, and then you put it into some other location. Sometimes people refer to that as consuming the data or even ingesting the data. That's been a much more popular term of late. It's really the process of making data accessible. Extraction and access is really what we're thinking about here.
So the data is unusable before it's extracted?
If you can't see it, you can't really analyze it or put it through your model. So the idea is making it available to where you want to use it, in a spreadsheet, in a business intelligence tool, into your, into a data lake, wherever.
Gotcha. So this is part of the technology and data series on the Coffee Break Sessions. So let's talk about the technology behind it a little bit. What ways are AI helping with data extraction?
We can define data in three different ways. One is structured data. Think of rows and columns or databases. Semi-structured, where there's some element to the structure, like a system log file that says what was done and what was changed, to unstructured data. And you can think of news articles as an example of unstructured data. Where AI is helping, we've never really had much of a hard time with structured data. When you get to semi-structured and unstructured data, being able to pull that, maybe something semi-structured, put it into some type of structure that's easier to use, or unstructured data like news articles to determine what the Fed's going to do with their interest rates. This certainly allows organizations to use this technology to roll through massive amounts of unstructured data and gain some insights, gain some information that's going to be useful for planning their cash flow, looking at risk, or perhaps detecting different types of exposure changes.
Okay, so it's helping sift through some of the data that you don't even need to look at.
That you can't, like you couldn't hire enough people to look at it, and so it allows you to roar through that, yeah.
Does it miss stuff?
Of course it does. If you use something like ChatGPT as a sense of AI to do that, right? That was part of your question. You can go and ask for things, and it misses elements. It doesn't categorize something. I remember I did this to check, what were the reserve requirements for the U.S., and I couldn't remember when things changed. There wasn't necessarily a table I could find, so I sent it off on its mission, and it came back and it didn't have some information. I was like, I knew there was a 12% reserve requirement at one point in time, et cetera. And I said, what about these rates? And then it looked and said, oh, sorry. I'm not sure why it said sorry, but it went through it. I guess it hunted a little more deeply, found some other data points and said, oh yeah, for this period, there was this rate. If I didn't have some knowledge of some of these changes, I might have been content with that initial search. Same thing if you have bad data or misformatted data and you do a query and you don't pull up all of the companies you're expecting to or all of the names, you might have more exposure to a particular counterparty, but something's classified differently. And so therefore you miss it. So there's always the issue of you might miss some data, you might miss some information, but hopefully as we look at these and manage these processes more thoroughly, there's ways to help get more and more data, but that's always the challenge, that you might miss something. You might miss something that's important.
Yeah. Eventually it'll get to a point where you ask it to do something for you and it will come back with some clarifying questions. I haven't seen where it's doing that yet, but that might get you into much more detail, like you were looking for a specific number, correct? And it couldn't find the information, but if it had come back and said, give me more information on what you're looking for in a category or whatever, then it knows where to look specifically.
Well, if we're talking about AI and extracting data or pulling out data and doing some research, the ability for the machine to run through data should be much more thorough. So if I'm looking to see correlations or causation between planned temperature changes? What will that do to how much oil we buy? And what about the price of oil over time? Those may be things I'm concerned about from a Treasury perspective. But there might be some other elements that create preceding factors or cause and effect that you could have tried to find other correlations that I don't necessarily know what to think about. It's like, okay, I know the consumption is related to temperature outside because there's heating and cooling that goes on. Well, maybe there's another factor about the economic variables and changes there. There might be 3 other factors that I don't think about. But the idea of I want to extract data and I want to do some analysis, I might be able to find more correlations by having it go and hunt and see if it can find some mathematical or logical connection that I don't necessarily think about.
All in half of a second.
I think that's going to take a little more than half of a second. I know sometimes when we ask questions, it's churning through lots of data. So from an AI perspective, it's churning through a lot of data. But you're right. It's ridiculously fast, compared to, we have interns, and it used to be you assigned interns these tasks where they got to plow through a ton of data. Well, that's not what we assign them now so much because, you can have the system churn through stuff. If they do it way faster, they usually do a better job the first till the intern's really, really well trained and they understand the domain. So I think that's another area that's changed and challenged what we're doing.
Do you have any practical examples of ways that people are working this into their technology?
So probably the most broad-based practical example of data extraction, I would say, would be where companies want to leverage the power of data lakes. They have cloud-native technology. They want to leverage business intelligence tools on top of data lakes and other sources. The ability to extract this type of data, put it in a location that can be used well, allows for some of those areas I talked about, fraud detection, other anomalous, value of doing anomaly detection for quality control, example, or anything that's out of the ordinary. Also for, pattern detection and trends like forecasts. That could be for accounts receivable and Treasury. Now, on the accounts receivable side and Treasury side, there's quite a bit happening now. It's primarily being done by the technology firms that have built the AI functionality and the tools there to run things on an unattended basis at a detail level, at an individual client level, let's say for accounts receivable, to look and make projections at a company by company basis, a customer by customer basis, based upon their payment trends, which is different. In the past, it used to be you'd have to do statistical analysis against the law of large numbers and what existed there, find some type of level of fit to what you would expect for the data. And now it's able to grind through at a detail level. So that's helping with forecasting for AR, for overall Treasury. Those things are largely being done by the tech vendors, and companies are starting to adopt that.
Gotcha. So you said something about AI missing, well, it's sifting through this data, it can miss information. But is the information that it's giving you always reliable, or does it just make stuff up? Does it come to wrong conclusions?
When you send something to look for data, it depends on the parameters that are used in the tools. Like if you just run a query, it's going to pull something back or not. You might set some tolerances to retrieve the data. But I think anybody knows, from playing around with Excel, certain types of lookup type functionalities, is it exact match or is it close? And knowing what can result, it gives you something that's close as opposed to you're only looking for something exact. And knowing those differences matters, however you query for that information. And, it depends on what the tool is trying to do. Will it give you something close? Will it give you something general? That's true from the use of Excel to different tools, whether it's, using Python or you're using some type of AI tool to gather data. Is it trying to extrapolate or triangulate something? But you just have to be careful on knowing what the range is and how they operate.
So is it going to work when someone makes a decision and then later on it doesn't go so well and they go to their boss and say, the AI told me to do it?
Well, I don't know that AI systems have surpassed humans in the ability to find scapegoats to accuse or blame others. Like nobody could have predicted this to happen. Well, that's not true. People predicted certain things. Our data was really bad, and we didn't expect it to be that bad. Well, data's always bad. We always expect it to be bad, and it's there's all kinds of assumptions on the quality of data we have, and so this is another tool. Hopefully, we use these types of tools to better triangulate and total things. So the idea of how do you reconcile the data that you get? How do you know if it's reasonable? You know it's reasonable because you have deep experience in that area. You know it's reasonable because data sources are very trustworthy. You know the data from a file, perhaps from a file that came in, perhaps is trustworthy because there's hashing. Mathematically, there's no way it could have been changed, or there's control totals based upon certain fields are added up. There should be ways to check and validate some items to make sure it's not just directionally correct, but from a magnitude perspective, it's pretty close. It's in the neighborhood.
All right. So data extraction is pulling data from multiple different sources, and Treasury's using AI to make that process extremely quick and save man hours. And any final thoughts on this, Greg?
The only thought is, as you were asking some questions, it made me think about the idea of, trust but verify, triangulate, do reasonability checks, make sure we're understanding data and the tools we use, and it brings me back to a really old example. I remember sometimes we would look at spreadsheets people would run, and there would be some kind of total they'd put on there. And the total would be off by, I can't remember what the amount was off by. It was off by 40,000. And this was probably the most common mistake. And if you looked at the numbers and you had them quickly, like, why is it off? And this was oftentimes in the far right column at the very top of the spreadsheet, they'd put a date in a numerical value. It was a date. And so at the bottom, they would run the sum, and it would capture the date that would add it as a date. And so it'd be off by a certain number. And so these are unintended consequences of not thinking through, if I run it to the top of the page, I include other data sets. That type of situation is, we always have to be careful. It'll vary how that plays out in different types of technology in different days and ages. But we always have to be a little bit skeptical. Check, make sure it's reasonable, make sure it fits, and we'll do better when that's the case.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, Craig. And for our listeners, tune back in every first and third Thursday of the month for another episode of the Coffee Break Sessions.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.